Compared to other high-end piano makers, it's often Steinway's sound that sets it apart.
As a performer, I can wear many different masks depending on the piece that I'm playing. There's some pieces you want to be very, very diabolical, and Liszt, And at the same time, lightness.
Creating that sound starts here in New York, at one of only 2 Steinway factories in the world. Each grand piano is 5 to 9 feet long and weighs between 540 and 990 pounds. Often, the bigger the piano, the pricier it will be. About 85% of a Steinway piano is made of wood, and one of the most crucial woods is used for the soundboard.
The soundboard is the life of the instrument, the soul of the instrument. This is Alaskan Sitka spruce. This is the most expensive wood that we have in the piano, and we actually get it from the trees primarily that are on the shady side, the north-facing side of these islands. So they grow very little each year, and that means that we have growth rings that are very close together, not spaced apart.
Sitka spruce is used in other stringed instruments like guitars, and it grows in a few areas in the northwest US. But more than 50% of the Alaskan Sitka spruce they source won't meet Steinway standards. The wood must have a very specific grain density and direction, both which can impact the quality of sound. Steinway looks for closely packed, straight grains, no more than plus or minus 15 degrees off a 90-degree vertical grain. There's a reason it's so strict about this. It's partly why, when you press a key on a Steinway piano, you hear a distinctly long, sustained tone.
One with wind and cloud. Into the wind.
The soundboard's edge must attach perfectly to the piano's rim, the curved rim frame of the instrument. The full rim is made up of an inner and outer rim. Some piano makers attach each of these pieces separately, but at Steinway, a team of artisans bends both together. Steinway says this method gives the piano a stronger foundation, lowering the chances it will break. Steinway uses hard rock maple, both the inner and outer rims.
Fate is upon me.
The key here is to use wood that will, again, allow sound to flow freely.
Some companies, as an example, will have hard rock maple for the outside rim, but the inside rim, to save money, they'll use something like Luan. Luan is not as dense and hard as hard rock maple. And when you have your sound waves in that soundboard, some of them are being absorbed a little bit by that Luan, more than they would be by hard rock maple.
The consistent touch of the keys is another valuable element unique to each Steinway piano. There are just 2 artisans in the entire factory trusted with weighing off all 88 keys of every keyboard. This ensures each key is balanced, so a pianist won't have to use more force to press one key over another.
I used to dream about the pianos chasing me. Now it's not a problem. It's up to the boss. I listen, I pay attention to what it wants. That's the key to it, is pay attention.
We're way behind schedule.
And watch that hammer. That's the key to it.
Each key is connected to a felt hammer. When pressed, the hammer strikes the strings to create sound. A key shouldn't respond to the finger's touch too quickly or too slowly.
So when I go to check the return, it stays. You see the hesitation? It's no good. That means it'll stay up in the piano. You see how fast that one is? That's too fast. So I take this one away.
Transfiguration.
Then I put this one back, and it wants the small one.
One with nature.
You see? So I put the small one. You see how nice it is?
Wind and cloud.
And that tells you what it wants. So that shows
The wind knows.
it's different. Everyone is different.
Take your true form.
One of the most difficult jobs is the final tone inspection. The goal is to create a balanced tone throughout the piano by slightly adjusting the hammers as needed.
From note to note, we can soften or harden these mallets, or hammers as we call them, and balance the sound that they generate into the string.
The quality of a piano's tone is incredibly nuanced, something only an experienced ear can decipher.
If I take this note and then soften it, in this case I will put a needle in the hammer to soften it, then you'll hear that tone change. It's a little bit smaller. And in increments, small steps, I can go through and find the notes that are too big, too bright, and step them down. Well, I'm 58, and I started when I was 28, so that's 30 years and counting. I'm still learning how to do this. It never stops.
Like the ways you can customize a Rolls-Royce car, you can do similarly with a Steinway piano. Depending on special editions, veneers, and wood finishes, prices for a single piece can reach $500,000, like these pianos designed for Steinway by Lenny Kravitz. In the piano vault underneath the factory, Steinway houses one of the most expensive pianos it's ever produced, worth $2.5 million.
Written in the stars.
On average, the price of a new Steinway piano increases about 30% every year.
Adorn my
This is
night.
partly because the cost of Alaskan Sitka spruce increases at a higher rate than inflation, according to Steinway. And while the new pieces get more expensive, old ones become more valuable too. A Steinway piano can last several decades with the required touch-ups and restorations. A 1965 Steinway Model D piano is worth over $98,000 today. That's more than 13 times what it likely sold for. And although there are several elements that greatly impact the price, it's the musician who ultimately decides what the piano is worth to them. Do you recognize this photo? What about these? They were all taken with a Hasselblad camera.
Transfiguration.
It's a name every photographer knows. But if you wanted to buy this Hasselblad camera, you'd pay over $30,000. And that doesn't even include the lens. So why would anyone pay so much for a camera? And what makes Hasselblads so expensive? To understand why people love Hasselblad cameras, it helps to look at this image. If you zoom way in, you can see incredible detail. The photos are fantastic, but it's a little more complicated than that. Hasselblad has been making cameras for 80 years, but they weren't always this expensive. In 1948, Hasselblad's first consumer camera cost around $500,
Next on the
or
agenda.
about $5,900 today. And, adjusted for inflation, its film cameras from the 70s cost around $5,300. But when the company transitioned to digital, the price exploded. In 2004, Hasselblad's first digital camera sold for around $24,000. That was more than a 200% price increase from its previous model, which used film. Okay, so it's expensive. But what actually makes this camera different? Hasselblad's high-end cameras consist of three main parts: the digital back, the body, and the lens. Just the digital back, which includes the sensor, costs over $26,000.
My will and body.
Hasselblad
Access
sensor
denied.
is unique in a way that it's much larger in an area. The individual pixel is bigger, and that provides lower noise and wider dynamic range.
Take a look at this photo of a
Next
motorcycle.
on the agenda.
When you zoom in, you can clearly see the texture of the handle and the wear on its tires. Larger sensors capture more detail, and Hasselblad's is one of the biggest available. Its cameras are what's called medium format. Basically, it means the sensor is big, and it's what makes these cameras so expensive. Your smartphone camera sensor is around this big. A popular professional camera, like the Sony a7R, is much larger. But it looks tiny compared to Hasselblad's sensor.
When medium format technology transitioned from analog to digital, the medium format sensors became extremely expensive, and the camera systems became extremely expensive and very niche.
The sensor in this camera is actually made by Sony, but Hasselblad has its own proprietary calibration process to achieve the colors and image quality it wants.
We're way
Very
behind
useful
schedule.
for the skin tones or the reproduction of the artwork and so on, where you really need to make sure that the colors you have in real life are the ones that will end up later in the photographs.
Medium format cameras are mainly used for product and fashion photography, as well as art reproduction. Photographers who need this type of specialized technology can't use off-the-shelf consumer cameras, and these shoots usually take place in a studio where the camera's bulky size isn't an issue. But there's another factor that makes Hasselblad cameras unique. Unlike other companies, Hasselblad doesn't mass produce its cameras. It makes them in small batches assembled by hand.
Take your true form!
This is partly because Hasselblad doesn't make that many cameras. Hasselblad doesn't disclose exactly how many cameras it makes. But in 2018, The Verge reported that Hasselblad's yearly production was under 10,000 units. Other manufacturers like Canon produce millions of cameras each year. But this process also ensures that each camera meets Hasselblad's quality standards.
Here in production, we have people that works here for over 30 years, and for special tasks, we have people that they just do that task. Nobody else can do that.
Hasselblad assembles its cameras here in Gothenburg, Sweden. Remember this old photo? Production today looks pretty similar. Its facility is more like a lab than an assembly line. Here, each component is tested, connected, and soldered.
Into the wind.
But learning how to adjust each part isn't easy. Assemblers rely on both precise instruments and the sound and feel of each component to know that it's working properly.
My favorite part is the mirror assembly. This part. I know that's not working well because of the click. You have to work here maybe in assembling these parts, maybe months.
I will have order.
Making it right.
When you charge $30,000 for a camera, quality control is a top
Take your true
priority,
form!
and assemblers take their
Cryo
job very seriously.
The whole process requires a lot of patience. You will end up learning to be very careful while mounting these tiny parts. Otherwise, you will run into different issues afterward while testing the camera.
Assemblers complete a camera in around 6 to 8 hours. But calibration can take up to a third of that time.
What's unique about Hasselblad cameras is that each sensor is individually calibrated and tested to a single pixel level, which is very time consuming and quite unlike in this industry.
But pressure to deliver consumer-focused cameras has increased. In the past few years, Hasselblad has released more affordable cameras, around $6,000. These cameras have a smaller sensor compared to other more expensive models. The competition in this price range is steep. Sony's latest Alpha 1 camera costs a bit more, but it can shoot 8K video and has super fast autofocus. And while the sensors on cheaper cameras aren't as large, those cameras pack more features that appeal to a wide range of photographers.
One with wind and cloud.
Hasselblad says that it's working to introduce more entry-level medium format cameras, but that it will continue to support its high-end customers. And for many photographers who need uncompromising image quality, this Hasselblad continues to be worth the price. Just one 2.5 kilogram durian from Nandaburi, Thailand can cost $380. Yet the fruit has a smell that some people find extremely unpleasant. In fact, durian is banned in several airports and hotels around the world. But in Asia and the Pacific Islands, durian is known as the king of fruit. In 2019, one Nandaburi durian sold at auction for $48,000. So what draws people to this pungent, spiky fruit? And why is it so expensive?
We're way behind
Thailand
schedule.
is expected to harvest almost 1 million
Next on the
metric tons of
agenda.
durian in 2021. Durian is native to several tropical climates around the world, including Thailand. Thailand alone grows over 300 varieties, but the most expensive durians are grown in Nandaburi province. They're known as Nant durian. Nant makes up the highest grade of durian in Thailand and is often given as a token of respect. But even among Nant durians, two varieties stand out. The most expensive, Kan Yao durian, and the slightly more affordable Montong durian.
เพราะว่าผลไม้ต้องเข้าใจว่าคำว่าผลไม้ มันก็เหมือนงานโมเดลที่แบบว่าออกมาทุกลูกแต่ก็ไม่เหมือนกันทุกลูกรสชาติมันก็จะแตกต่างกันทุกลูกมันไม่เหมือนกันทุกลูกเหมือนกันก็คือ
Nant durian is described as having refined and sweet pulp with a mild fragrance and creamy texture, whereas other lesser-grade durians are said to have a stronger smell and a watery texture. Nant durian has a distinct taste and smell for two main reasons: Nanthaburi's environment and the growing practices of its farmers. Nanthaburi province has been a center for durian farming in Thailand for over 300 years. Farmers in this region have been honing their technique for generations, using their resources and skill to grow the highest quality durians possible. One of the resources they depend on is the Chao Phraya River, which flows through Nanthaburi and fertilizes the soil.
แล้วดินที่เราปลูกเนี่ยเป็นดินเหมือนดินตะกอนตั้งแต่สมัยปู่ย่าตายายอะค่ะมีใบท้องหลามีพืชตระกูลถั่วปลูกเพื่อให้บำรุงดินอยู่ตลอดเวลาค่ะรสชาติเลยแตกต่างจากที่อื่น
But the river water isn't used to water the durian trees themselves. Farmers in Nanthaburi prefer to buy fresh water, which they believe improves the final quality of the durian.
จะบอกว่าทุเรียนนมเป็นทุเรียนที่ปราณีตในการปลูกใช่ไหมของคนอื่นเขาคือเขาใช้น้ำบาดาลน้ำในแม่น้ำลำธารได้แต่ของจังหวัดนนท์ต้องใช้น้ำประปาคือคุณทำสวนคุณก็ต้องซื้อน้ำแล้วอะก็คือถ้าเวลาปลูกทุเรียนนนท์เนี่ยเขาจะปลูกด้วยการวิธีการยกโคกยกให้สูงขึ้นแล้วก็ปลูกต้นไม้ใต้โคนต้นเพื่อให้ความชื้นแล้วก็รดน้ำทุกวันละครั้งตอนเช้า
After planting, it takes about 6 years for a healthy durian tree to bear fruit. Once the trees start to flower, farmers count the days until the fruits are ripe. Depending on the breed, this can span 90 to 150 days. But it's not only the time and labor that make Nant durian so pricey. The costs to provide this kind of care add up. Just the water costs about $2,200 per year.
ถ้าสมมติพี่ถาม